Is it safe to play a prank on someone while scuba diving underwater? Hello and welcome. Welcome to Input English. This is a true story about scuba diving. It involves me and a good friend of mine, and we were on a scuba diving trip to Bonaire. Bonaire is part of the Dutch West Indies, and it's located off the coast of Venezuela. We went there for a week-long scuba diving trip because of the extraordinary conditions for scuba diving on that wonderful small island. Because we were only there for 1 week at a time and at considerable expense, we wanted to dive a lot. We typically would dive 3 times during the day, and most of the time we would do a night dive as well. During the day, you would see a lot of fish, a lot of interesting corals. It was a beautiful place to dive. Most of the diving is from the shore. So you get in the water, in the shallow water, and then you swim out, typically underwater or on the surface if you like, to the point where the reef tilts over and goes to depth. So this part, this upper part, is just sand. And so you would swim out over the sand, and there's not much to look at. It's just a thankless swim out to the reef, and it can be 100 meters. When you get to the edge of the reef, you start seeing a lot of corals, and you see a lot of fish and a lot of animals, and so you know that you are there at the edge of the reef. And then typically in Bonaire, the reef pitches over at an angle and goes down to greater than 100 feet before the sand levels off. We had been diving all week on that sort of reef. Toward the end of our trip, we decided to do a night dive, but we chose an entry point near to the hotel for convenience. We drove to the location, we assembled our gear, and got into the water. Something you need to know is all my scuba gear is black. Why? I like it that way. Okay. So when you get in the water at night on a scuba diving trip, at least when I get in the water, there is a little sense of apprehension, a little measure of fear, because you can't see under the water. It's like you're getting into a bottle of ink. You can't see what's below you, and it would be reasonable to have just a little bit of fear of the unknown. But we had been diving in this location for the whole week, and we were very familiar with diving in Bonaire because of previous trips, so there was no real basis of the fear. It was just fear of the unknown. Once in the water, everything's fine. We have a very powerful flashlight. We're very comfortable in the water, and we go about our business enjoying our dive. In the location we chose, there was not a lot of sand. Basically, you'd get in the water and you'd swim out a few feet, and the reef would be almost a wall, and it would descend very sharply, and all the coral and all the marine life is on that wall. We love diving along walls. Once you're on the wall, you have only 2 choices. There's nothing to see out in the deep water. There are no fish out there, and there are no interesting things to look at. It's just water. So basically your choices include turning to the left and following the wall, or turning to the right and following the wall. On this evening, we turned to the left, which took us back toward some of the resorts where other people would be diving. We had been on the reef for perhaps 10 minutes, and I saw in the distance flashlights which told us that there were divers coming toward us exploring the reef. So I signaled to my friend, and we came together and I pointed to the lights, and he looked and saw them and nodded. Yes, he saw the lights. And then I said, we're going to turn off our flashlights. And you could see him smile through his mask. And I flipped off my flashlight, and he turned off his. There was enough ambient light that we could actually see pretty well. I suspect the moon was out, and there was enough light where we were on the reef that we weren't going to collide with something. We swam in the direction toward these other divers, but we went down on the wall to be below them. We never turned on our flashlights. They swam toward us, and we got a very good view of 3 divers, each with a flashlight, each exploring the reef and having a wonderful time. But they didn't know we were there. We were far enough out and below them that our bubbles coming up were outside of their view with their flashlights. Had they been looking for us, they could have found us, but they simply didn't suspect that anyone was there. And since our lights were off and were dressed in all black, we were invisible. So I swam up toward them and wound up in the middle of the 3 divers, and they still didn't know I was there. At that point, I turned on my flashlight, which announced my presence in the midst of them. As soon as I turned my flashlight on, there was a lot of motion with the flashlights being managed by these other divers. They were very surprised. They didn't expect us there. And they swam toward me, and one of the fellows did this, indicating perfect. And I got a thumbs up from somebody else. And basically, I surprised them, startled them, but they were actually very entertained that someone had the ability to be so stealthy as to swim right into the middle of the group and then turn on their flashlight. Of course, no one got hurt. No one was in any danger. It was just an entertaining little experiment that I did, and everyone involved thought it was a lot of fun. After that encounter, we continued on our dive and then went back to our entry point so that we could get out and get back to the truck. So that's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I invite comments below, and I hope you join us in the next video. See you soon.